The September issue of Exceptional Parent magazine focuses on the elderly and those who care for them. Sign up for free and read it today at www.epmagazine.com.
Oscar Mike Radio is a proud podcast partner of Reach Across America Radio, heard every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They're also big supporters of the nonprofit I Got Your Six, Two Lives at Once. And with every wreath you sponsor through Oscar Mike Radio, $5 goes back to this great organization dedicated to making a difference in the lives of veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders battling PTSD. Two Lives at Once pairs these brave men and women together with dogs rescued from kill shelters. In this way, two lives are saved at the same time by saving each other. Donate now. Go to reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio to help. That's reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio.
Suicide is preventable, and each of us has a role to play in suicide prevention.
Suicide is complex. There is no single cause.
And it's not always a mental health issue. It could be loss of a job or home, financial or relationship issues, pain, or leaving the military.
Suicide does not discriminate. It affects all ages, races, and genders, veterans or not.
If you know a veteran who is struggling, connect with them. Let them know help is available.
There is quick and easy access to services in times of crisis.
Dial 988, then press 1. Talking about it is okay.
Don't keep it inside. Don't be ashamed. Don't wait. Reach out.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis. I am your host. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hubazoo Network. You can find out more on hubazoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asek of Asek Real Estate, Army National Guard veteran Mark Holmes of Reapers Detailing and Power Washing, and my supporters, Caisson Shaving Company and Exceptional Parent Magazine. I like how these kinds of conversations we're going to have come together. I'm on someone else's show talking with their guest, and we start having a good vibe, a good relationship, a good set of communication. And they're like, hey, I think you should talk to this guy or this woman or this business. And so this is how this conversation got together. I want to thank Keith Hayes of Sensitive One Productions for having me on his show. I got to meet Grant Magers from American Rounds, which led to me meeting Michael Sodini of Walk the Talk America. So here we are. It's just a cascading ripple effect that is a thing. Michael, I want to welcome you to Oscar Mike Radio, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
No, I really appreciate you having me, and I hear what you're saying. It's like force multipliers, right? Like
right.
You hear this message, and then you find out other people are doing other things, and then you get the word out. So I appreciate you having me on the show so I could tell the audience about what Walk Talk America is all about.
Yeah, it was a really interesting segment of the Grant, Keith Hayes, and Travis talk. And he's talking about, hey, I have this device that but sells you, ammunition at like a kiosk. And he's like, we're partnering with Walk the Talk America, and you ought to check them out. And I did. And I looked at a lot of nonprofits over the years. I've studied nonprofits a lot, but this is the first time I've seen something like this because I'm pro Second Amendment. Grew up with firearms, Marine Corps veteran myself, but this is a different kind of organization around gun safety, mental health, and gun freedom. So for all the folks out there who are seeing you for the first time, kind of just tell us who you are, and then we'll go into how you got into this.
Okay, so I'm a third generation firearms industry professional. I got my job through nepotism. I got thrown into the fire. I got thrown into gun world because I didn't have a choice. My family said, you're coming to work for the family business after you graduate college." I owned one of the largest importers in the United States for firearms for many years, called Eagle Imports. And what we did
Oh
is
yeah.
yeah, I don't know if Bursa, yeah, like, yeah. Yeah, so that was me, right? My family owned Eagle Imports, which imported, our main line was Bursa, which is an Argentinian handgun, but we also had Grand Power, which is Slovakian handgun, and Metro Arms, which is from the
Yeah.
Philippines. Yeah, so quite a selection of different handguns. We used to do like 68,000 guns a year without any military contracts or police contracts or anything like that. So we armed a lot of Americans. But one of the greatest things about not being a gun guy per se, right? Like I'm known in the firearms industry as the most ungun gun guy. I'm a gun guy, but people call me that because I grew up in two of the worst places to own guns, New Jersey and San Francisco, California, right? So
Wow. Yeah.
you didn't have firearms like where I grew up. It just wasn't a thing, right? You didn't go hunting, so I just wasn't versed in firearms culture. But when I got into the industry, that was a very good learning experience for me. And I was able to kind of see the issues that we have as the firearms community when it comes to negative outcomes, mostly suicide. That's a huge one. 2009, the president of my company took his own life with a firearm, and back then nobody talked about it. I always equated to like the movie Twister, right? In Twister, no one talked about an F5. So any of your listeners that know that reference,
I remember watching that movie way back in the day.
yeah, nobody talked about F5. We didn't talk about any negative outcomes of firearms because we didn't want them used against us, right? Everything got used against us. So we kind of glossed over a lot of that. But obviously it hit me really hard in 2009. Always wanted to do something. 2018, I'm at a dinner with a complete random stranger who's asking me about mass shootings. And she says, "Well, what happens during a mass shooting?" Right. And I said, "Well, everybody blames us. We blame firearms, or sorry, we blame mental health, and nothing ever happens." Right. Like that's the
That's
way it
pretty
was
much
for
the
many,
script.
many.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the script, right? So what I did is I said, okay, if that's the case, like how can we work with the mental health community on things we can agree upon? And originally what I wanted to do is give money to mental health to fund like the resources, the outreach that they had talked about that they had lost from all the cutbacks over the years when it came to mental health. That was a little naive. Like I I didn't realize that they didn't have these things in place, for us to fund. But it was a blessing in disguise because what it forced me to do is create Walk the Talk America and look for innovative ways. And this is essentially what we do. At our core, we're a suicide prevention organization from the firearms industry. What we do is we look for innovative ways to get gun owners help without fear of consequence or right restriction. But we're much more than that now. We've grown in the past 6 years to be, there's an advocacy piece to this, there's an education piece to this, for especially the non-gun owning community, or one would say the gun ignorant crowd or the anti-gun crowd, to kind of say like, hey, look, these are some out of the box innovative ways and solutions that we could look for, for firearms owners to kind of bring mental health and suicide prevention to the forefront of gun ownership. But I'm going to pause right there because there's a lot to unpack, right? But
So just unpacking the first thing, for so long, even before 2009, like even in the military side, the veterans side, suicide wasn't talked about a whole lot. It wasn't until like 2014, 2016 when it's like, hey, wait a minute, we have a real problem here, that we actually had to start talking about it. And I remember going to the VA for care and being asked point blank, hey, do you own a firearm in your home? And I was very reluctant to, in fact, I'm like, I refused to answer. I'm like, I don't see how, because I was apprehensive, scared that that was going to be somehow used against me. And to your earlier point, one of the things that prevents a lot of people in law enforcement or mandated reporters from going for help is, if I say I have a problem, they know I have a firearm, I'm seen as damaged goods. They're going to take my professional personal firearms. And now what do I do? So I guess my first thing is how did you start bridging those gaps with like the VA and other organizations to start building this foundation of help for people?
So for me, what's wild is I really wasn't thinking of veterans when I started this. I was thinking of gun owners. Now, I was inspired by veterans because here's the one thing I did notice about being in the firearms community. Um, there was an insane amount of combat vets, active duty military, and first responders that gravitate towards our industry, whether it's after they retire, they come in and work in the industry, or, you know, like SHOT Show and the NRA show. There's a lot of people that are walking around that can identify with that community. And what I always loved about the veteran community was how they kind of banded together to find these like solutions to their issues that didn't involve the VA, or they had felt like they had been let down by the VA and they only had each other. So I was like, okay, can we take that and just do it for all gun owners? Now, what I didn't understand what was happening at the time was it was going to resonate with the veteran community and the active duty military community and first responders, was because a lot of people didn't want to be singled out, right? When they saw this organization, they're like, okay, it's under the guise of firearms ownership, right? Just guns in general. And then there's, if you look at like the Venn diagram, there's all the overlapping circles. In 2019, I randomly get a message from the White House that says we would like you to come and be on the prevents. Yeah. And to me, I thought I was unpunked, right? Like I'm looking around going, this can't be right. Because it was in the infancy stages of the organization. And I look back at it now and I'm like, oh my God, I would love another shot at being on that team as well. Now, because we've come such a far way, but like back then, for me, it was like, okay, how did I get here? And I remember they're saying like, hey, because you're you. But it was really awesome because to me, that was the first time that the VA had reached out to recognize that there might be some blind spots. So they were bringing people from the table, like, the table was full of people from all walks of life. I realized quickly that I was the only person from the firearms industry at that table at the time. And it was really great. And I want to share this like really fast anecdotal story that I think is super cool.
Speedy here.
Okay. So when I got there, we had to give these little TED Talks, and we had we had to talk about what we're doing and how we can make change and all these things. And I kind of spitballed mine, but at the end, I ended it with, the firearms industry can help you prevent suicide, but you just can't make us a villain anymore. And, I thought that was the perfect way to end it. And it was great because, there's like 30 of us sitting in this table, and then around us, there's like 70 people, in this big conference room, and highly decorated people in there, you could tell. And this one guy gets up, and he's, like I said, he's super decorated. He's just like, you need to listen to that guy. He points at me and he's like, listen to him, because he tells a story about when he was like 18 years old, and he's just like, yeah, I came to you as 18-year-old, and the first thing you did is hand me a gun, and you told me to name it, you made it part of my identity, and you sent me overseas to kill with it, kill for you. And he's like, and I did that, and I did that well. And he's like, then you have no use for me. My time here is done. You send me back home, and I'm starting to have a hard time adjusting to going back to regular life. And, I'm in crisis. And he's like, and the first thing you want to do is take away the thing that means freedom to me, the thing that you gave to me and told me is part of my identity, told me to name. Now you want to take that away when I'm going through struggles. And he's like, listen to that guy. And that was it. That's all I needed, right? And I think like the people at the VA were like, okay, like let's hear what this guy's got to say. And one of my recommendations at the time for the VA was you need to be more involved in the firearms industry because we're getting your people when they're done when you're done with them. They're coming to us to work for our companies. You know, and there's a lot of angry veterans out there, a lot of people that felt that they've been let down. And if you really want to make change and you really are, you know, you're growing and you're understanding the blind spots that you have, you need to be connected with the firearms community because firearms mean so much to these people that you say you care about. So cut to 2024, you know, the VA, Walk the Talk America, and the National Shooting Sports Foundation work hand in hand together. The VA actually has a presence at SHOT Show. Those are the things I'm really proud of, right? Because you don't make change by just hoping things will change themselves. Sometimes you have to ask for it. You have to make people understand why. So that's really how the connection came between, say, like the VA and the DoD.
We'll go back to the VA in a second, but how have you taken what you've learned about the veteran experience and applied it to all gun owners who, you know, may not have served, or they're a mom in Idaho just wanting, you know, some protection from wild animals, or someone in Compton, someone in Baton Rouge. How do you structure your program for everybody based off what you've learned?
Just through the planning of gun ownership, right? So like let's take one example.
Okay.
I had some friends that were veterans, and I used to hear them talk about like, well, my friend Dave here is the only one who could come take my guns in a crisis, right? We have this agreement with each other. Like if Dave doesn't feel like I'm good up here, he comes over and says, hey, why don't you let me take the firearms? Just we'll hold on to them for a couple of days and get you help, right? Like those are the type of things that I was like, well, that applies to every gun owner, right? Every gun owner could do it. And I always felt like the veterans were really good at kind of circling the wagons around each other and coming up with these creative plans or you know, let's face it, everybody that's in the military usually has a structure about them, right? They're vigilant.
Right.
Right? Am I wrong?
You're not wrong.
Yeah. Like everything operates smoother when it's like, I know what the objective is. I know if this happens, that this kicks in. Like, and I think that you could do that with all gun ownership. And I think like that's a lot of the inspiration that happened where it was like, how did they figure it out? Like they're figuring it out. Like, let's take some of that stuff because like I said, if you look at the Venn diagram, it's all overlapping. It's all people that love firearms. You know, like the mom from Idaho could just be as gung ho about firearms as the guy who served 25 years in the Marines. So that's how I kind of took the inspiration. It was not everything is a carbon copy of those things, but there's so many things. I mean, like I'll give you another example. We have a program called Cause a Pause. Cause a Pause was created to create time and space between you and your firearm in a time of crisis. And what we recommend this to mental health therapists, to tell this to people that might be in crisis. Hey, if you have a firearm in the house, why don't we start by putting a picture of something you love or someone you love on your safe, right? It's just a simple thing like that, right? So if you go into my safe, which is out there in my garage, like on my safe, I have two pictures. They're both of my daughters, right? Because I think about like what faces would get me to stop, snap me out of maybe this trance that I'm in if I'm in crisis. It's those two faces, right? Now it doesn't have to be your kids. Maybe your kids are the ones that make you want to go do that, but it could be something else that means I'm being funny, but it could be something that means something to you, right? But what inspired that was I had read an article about like GIs during World War II that were putting pictures of people they loved on their firearms, right? They were like putting them inside of the panels on the side of the firearm, like the grips and stuff like that. And I was just like, oh, that's kind of cool, right? Like little reminders of why we're doing this, why we need to keep fighting, why we need to come home. And it's the same concept, right? So it's like you build off of these little things that I've read about, and I'm like, that's the veteran community, that's the active duty military community. Like they're good at that.
You get that. I have to know, dealing with the VA can be a very monolithic, cumbersome experience, or it can be streamlined depending upon what's going on. But I have to think this took a lot of effort on you and your organization's part to work with the VA and collaborate with them. How did that come about?
It really was the prevents team, and then going up there and kind of showing them all the different ideas that Walk the Talk America had just for the firearms industry. But I don't want to just beat up on the VA. I will say that there's two sides to this, right? And I'll tell another anecdotal story. Before I was going up to the White House in 2019 to work with the team, word got out, and a few of my colleagues that are in the firearms industry were like, "Oh my God, you're going to go talk to the VA at the White House? Like, we need to tell you some stuff, right?" And they're like, this, all this is wrong. You need to go up there and tell them like this is BS and they need to change that, right? So I get up there and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm armed with all this information that I'm going to be able to hit the VA with to make them see the error of their ways. And I sit there and I tell the people that are leading the VA, and they're like, yeah, we changed that policy last year, or that policy's been changed for 2 years. And I'm like, ooh, that's a problem. I'm like, here's your problem. This is why you need to have a relationship with the firearms industry, because you have a lot of highly decorated combat vets that are now working in this industry that were burned by you, and they're not talking very highly of you. And they don't know, once you've been burned by the VA, most likely you're not going to go back to the VA in a year and say, hey, did you change that? Have you improved? Have you gotten better? But the VA could have improved, or they could have made a change. And that's what I mean. This information needs to be passed around because you don't want people passing bad information to people, you know what I mean, inside the firearms community. So, you know, the relationship has happened organically and it's grown, and there's a trust factor. And I think that just comes from years of working together. But I do appreciate the VA's willingness to sit down and listen to, you know, what I think are blind spots or maybe things that they never thought about before. So I don't want to sit here and just smash the VA. I know that there's VA is massive, right? And there's a lot of vets out there, and some people have the best experience, right? Like, I'm sure you could attest to that.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things I learned about this year at the Mass, Veteran Service Officer conference was the VA SAVES program. And part of this is, you know, their aspect of training people how to deal with firearms related issues. And it's a real huge initiative with them. It just seems like, you know, a lot of suicides do happen by firearms. Things do happen. We'll talk about one here in a second. And I see it as a couple of different things. You have the side that says, hey, you know what, guns are great. Everybody should have guns. You have the side that says, you know, guns should be restricted. No one should have guns. I live in Massachusetts, which has now become a very difficult state to own a firearm in. And then you have, you know, hey, how do I make sense of all this? It's called kind of like three different things, your Venn diagram. And it seems like you're one of the few organizations I come across that's kind of in the center sweet spot of that Venn diagram that can speak to each different, you know, axis of that. You know, what's it like talking to the people who are like, you know what, we could just solve this by eliminating firearms entirely, and we wouldn't have this problem, because that's something that comes up a lot in public discourse and talk.
Yeah. I'm just trying to put this the most polite way. I appreciate anyone that wants to live in a cartoon world. I really do, because it's not that you hate guns. You just don't want people to die, which is, I think, almost everybody, right? Like, you have to really look for somebody who's like, I love death and destruction. But I try to validate people's feelings when they say things like that. I also try to make them understand with nuance, like how difficult that would be and what that means. And until someone can guarantee like my safety 24/7, I'm not giving up my firearms. And I don't think millions of other people they'd agree with me. But what I always try to tell people all the time is the genie in the United States is not going back in the bottle. I was a small firearms importer. And once again, I validate how they feel. I never, ever, ever not go that route. Like, I wanted them to understand that that's where we meet, on the island of saving lives. But I used to sell 68,000 guns with no military or law enforcement contracts. Like, I was a small company. If you think about the Rugers and the Smith and Wessons and the Glocks and Daniel Defenses, right? All these massive companies, there are millions and millions and millions of guns out there that aren't going back in the genie bottle. Like, it's just not going to happen. So what we have to do is understand that guns aren't as big an issue as we make them out to be when you look at the numbers and you talk with it in nuance. If you take the total number of gun deaths, right, the biggest issue is suicide.
Yep.
Until we can tackle suicide, and that's where I feel like the gun industry really can come in and help with that, because of the messaging and being the trusted messenger. Like, most people who buy a firearm are ready to listen to the company that they bought the firearm from in all aspects of life, right? When it comes to safety, when it comes to defense, like when it comes to freedom. But we lose 79 people. I think it's between 74 and 79, right? If you go by CDC numbers, a day to suicide prevention. We had a mass shooting right down the road from where I'm coming from today. I'm in Vegas, right? If we remember Mandalay Bay, October 1, that we lost 59 people that day, and that was horrific. But we lose 79 people, or 74, let's go low number, 74 people a day to suicide by firearm. We have a Mandalay Bay shooting every single day that gets zero media coverage because it doesn't sell ad space. And it's not sexy, right? It's like, you can't freak people out about that. And it makes people look at society and say, well, what's wrong? We need to find out why people are feeling like, hey, I have no other way out but this. And I think the firearm, it's quite frankly, can be the portal for people to get help. And that's where I'm trying to change the subject. Like, let's move away from banning all firearms or getting rid of guns. That you're still going to have death. You're still going to have horrific events happen. You know, people tell me all the time, these are the same people that say, well, if it just saves one life. And I'm like, okay, well, hammer violence, if it just saves one life, like, technically we should all be living in a bubble.
Ban bicycles, swimming pools, and stuff like that, and make exercise mandatory in America. And if we're about saving lives, speaking of saving lives, looking at your website and how you structure your programs, walk me through the Walkabout America toolkit, and because it was really interesting how you have like a virtual physical toolkit that I could use. I'm not really familiar with your program and your offerings, but it's a start to start having these conversations with people I know, other veterans, my children, because, my children are been taught how to deal with firearms. I just really like that aspect of what you offered.
We try to offer almost everything for everybody. So just so the listeners understand, we do free and anonymous mental health screenings. Why is that important? Hey, use it if you want, or don't, right? You don't even have to be in crisis to use it. We have people that contact us to take a screening once a month just to make sure that, to see where they're at, right? But what I wanted to do is get gun owners to start thinking about their mental health and thinking about ways that they can be involved in the conversation. My belief is that if you come up with enough solutions, like you come up with these toolkits that arm gun owners, because most of the time firearms owners would get into these conversations, right? And then would get frustrated because they didn't really have anything to fall back on when it came to how are you going to solve suicide prevention and mental health. We always said, well, that's their issue, right? That's the mental health side. Now, as firearms owners, if we can come forward and say, well, here's all the solutions that we have, whether it be Walk the Talk America or companies like Hold My Guns or NSSF Suicide Prevention Program. Now we're coming with our own solution. So first and foremost, I want to arm firearms owners that are really inspired by the Second Amendment. It means a lot to them, with solutions as opposed to just deflecting. So once you have solutions to problems, now you have a spot at the table. Now people can't challenge you like they used to. Right? Because I think the anti-gun side would always say, like, well, if you're not going to come up with solutions, then here's restriction, and we need to restrict you. Right? Now it's like, no, this is what we do, and we do it better than you. So one of the things we offer is free and anonymous mental health screenings for firearms owners. We have a lot of gun companies such as Ruger, Bursa, High Point, Canic, Arms Corps. Arms Corps puts it on the side of their ammo boxes, right? We encourage gun owners to take a free and anonymous mental health screening. It does not ask you about your firearms. It's just a way to check in on yourself without having to go to somebody to see if you're okay and just to see where you're at. And like I said, you don't have to be in crisis. Then we also have all these little campaigns, which you'll see in the toolkit. Things like Cause a Pause, which I talked about earlier, right? Campaigns like Train as Hard, retrieving your firearm from a locked safe as you do training with your firearm. Just little things that make gun owners think, because sometimes we forget about that aspect, right? We're like, I mean, you know how it is. Gun owners will tell you all day long about the 3-day AR course they took and how awesome it is and how much they've trained, right? But then we act like we can't train to retrieve our firearm. And I think that's a huge aspect of it. Just for talking to you, for example, like right now, I have a quick access safe underneath my desk that many times when I'm on the phone, I'm running my fingers over the code, right? Like I can open this thing in the pitch black dark of night in less than a second. And I also check the batteries every month on this thing. I know that it's never going to fail me, right? Because I stay prepared. It's little things like that that you can arm firearm owners with, like knowledge and advice and things that they can give. But we also do things like, we were the first company to create a firearms instructor mental health and suicide prevention curriculum. It's on our website. It's for free. We give it out for free for any firearms instructors. That was birthed out of the fact that there are certain states out there, like the state of California, New York, Maryland. There's, I think, New Jersey. There's a handful of them that are requiring an hour of that curriculum to be implemented in every CCW class taught. So a lot of firearms instructors were going back to the state and they're like, well, we're firearms instructors. Like, what do you want from us? Tell us what you want to say. We'll do it. Right. That's the biggest misunderstanding of the firearms community, is that we don't want to help. We do. We just don't know what you want. Right. So they went back to the state and they said, what do you want? And most of these states were like birds who wanted to fly south, but didn't know the reason why. They're like, we don't know. We don't have a curriculum. We just want you to tackle these issues. So Walk Talk America comes in and says, okay, you need that? Let's give you the most dynamic, amazing hour of your life, right? Like we want this to be fun. We want this to be something that gun owners are like, oh my God, this is awesome. And it's true. Most of the firearms instructors that use this, the majority of them aren't even in states that are being compelled by the state to teach it. It's just something that we always thought guns and mental health were mutually exclusive and we couldn't put them together. And now we're trying to change that narrative. And we do that through all of our toolkits, all of our resources, everything that we have on there. I mean, we even have a program called Kids to Kings, where we go into underprivileged, underserved neighborhoods and we teach these kids about firearms responsibility. We teach them about complex trauma, PTSD, life skills like financial advice, things like that really empower these kids, because many of these kids never ever get an opportunity to even have firearms introduced to them in a healthy manner. Like, think about that, right? If you're only getting your firearms information from, say, a hip hop video, or maybe it's your cousin, and we're not here to judge that, right? But maybe your cousin's out in the streets and he needs his firearm, but he carries it illegally. Everyone has a right to have access to proper firearms knowledge, and empower these kids to maybe grow up to be the next competition shooters, the next firearms instructors. We talked about force multipliers out there, right? Like, I want every kid from every neighborhood to be able to say, no, like, you're holding that wrong, or this is a powerful tool and it comes a responsibility. So empower people. That's what we want to do.
It almost seems like, to use the Marine Corps analogy, I remember my M16 was called Charlene. She's after a redhead I knew, beautiful girl. And, you do the creed. This is my rifle. They mean like it. But one part of it is I must master it as I must master myself. And I'm connecting with you on the fact that, hey, if you master all facets of firearms ownership and usage, you can, master yourself and be mindful of your own mental health, so you know when's a good time to get help. And I think that message really goes a long way.
Yeah. So this is the way I look at it.
Okay.
And I'm preaching to the choir with you, clearly, right? But someone who may be listening, when you get a firearm, and this is what a lot of the outside world doesn't understand about most firearms owners. Like we do train, we do take CCW courses, we do talk about these things, and when you take these courses, the safety rules get beaten into your head, right? Like we're the type of people that watch movies and we nitpick when we see like the main character muzzle flash a kid, or there's zero trigger discipline, right? So we're in tune to that world of firearms safety. The second thing that gets beaten into our heads, believe it or not, is defensive shootings. Most firearms owners understand that you're not just able to shoot somebody, even if they're breaking into your house, without your life becoming a living hell. So there is that aspect of the law, and understanding that it's not going to be all rainbows. Even if you're in the right, you're going to go through some hell if you're in a defensive shooting. Now, what I want to incorporate, because those two are always ingrained in everything that we do as responsible gun owners, but now I want this third aspect, which is better mental health and suicide prevention. Like there's no reason why that can't be part of gun ownership, just like, seatbelts are a part of cars. And I don't think it needs to be mandated. I think it's something that we as a culture, if we just start incorporating it, and you're hearing it over and over again, it's like, I bought this firearm, Ruger's telling me to be mindful of my mental health. Ruger's giving me all these different avenues of where I can do that through Walk the Talk America or whoever, right? I think I should listen to them, right? I think, yeah, that's part of the plan. That's part of the gun ownership plan, right? Like it's part of being prepared. And that's what gun ownership is like being prepared for the worst case scenario and hopefully never having to use it. I don't want to ever have to use my firearm, but I want to be prepared in all aspects. And being prepared, it dribbles down to my kids. If my kid is going through it because she lost her boyfriend and she thinks it's the end of the world, I need to know that there are firearms in this house, and I need to make sure, that she doesn't have access to them. And it's not even her, right? Like she's grown up with firearms her whole life, and we have an understanding, but I do not trust her, and I do not trust her friends, more importantly, right? So these are the things
Yeah.
These are the things I think as firearms owners, like we just didn't want to tackle them or didn't want to address them, or if we did it personally. But now I think we just need to start talking about it and then showing the rest of the world, sit down, we have this, we can do this better than you, we can work with you, but you can't do it like we can. We have the firearms owners here, we have the gun shops, we have the firearms instructors, and we have the manufacturers and the accessory makers. We can carry these messages of hope way better than, say, an outside source is. Who cares? We can lead the way.
I remember, watching Grant talk about the relationship between American Rounds, his organization, his company, and Walk the Talk America, and how you all had talked, and the sense of pride he had. And I was wondering, you've been doing this for a while now, you've worked really hard on it. Do you have any story of victory you can share with us? Like somebody, went through your program, used your resources, and either were able to save their own life or, in a sense, help somebody else? Just curious.
All day long. It's crazy. It's the anecdotal stories are some of the most amazing stories. I guess it depends on what aspect you want to talk about. I mean, we get people that contact us all the time. I mean, it warms my heart when someone contacts us and says, hey, like, I heard you talking about taking a mental health screening on the podcast, and I told my wife to do it, and she actually is now going to get help because I told her the story of, so I'm going to tell this really cute story about how I came up with the idea for the free and anonymous mental health screenings. So in the beginning of the organization, when I found out that I couldn't just give money to mental health and change the world, like they didn't have the answers, right? I really, at the very beginning of the organization, my idea was to take the big pharma way out of things. And I was just going to donate money to mental health, and it was going to come from the gun industry, and they were going to have a hard time not accepting it, right? But I found out that I had to, look inside the firearms community and say, well, what can we do to be different? Like anyone can just donate money to mental health. And I had been working with Mental Health America, who is the provider for the mental health screenings that we currently have on our website. They're the engine that drives it. And what I love about Mental Health America is when I found Mental Health America, they were the first mental health organization that I saw from their position paper 72 that said, we are going to take a stance on firearms that's going to be unpopular amongst our peers. We do not believe because you suffer from mental illness that you should lose your rights to firearms. Right. And I was like, okay, this is an organization that I need to talk to. Yeah, because I didn't even know if there was a mental health organization from the jump that would even talk to me. But anyway, so when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to buy my way out of it, I was looking for different ways to be innovative. And the first thing that I came up with was inspired by my daughter. So my daughter comes in, she's 11 years old. She says to me, Dad, I think I suffer from anxiety. And it's crazy because I grew up in a family from New Jersey. And if you would have said something like that, like if I would have said something like that to my grandfather, his response would have been, I will give you something to have anxiety about. And then you kept it moving, right? Like you never brought up anxiety again. But with my daughter, it was this really cute, teachable moment where the first thing that popped in my head was a screening. I was like, hey, hon, like the organization that Daddy works with, because she'd hang out in my office and do her homework and she heard me talking. And she said, yeah. I said, take the screening. They have a screening if you go online and it's for anxiety. And take it and answer it honestly, because no one's going to come to the door. No one's going to come here. There's nothing you could say that's going to get you in trouble. So 2 days later, she comes downstairs and she's like, hey, Dad, I took the thingy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, the thingy, the thing for anxiety. I was like, oh, yeah, you took the screening. She's like, yeah. And I said, well, how did it turn out? And she smiled and she goes, I only have mild anxiety. And I said, that's great, right? She says, yeah, I feel a lot better. And she's like, I'm going to pass this to like 3 of my friends. I think they need it. And she walked out of the room, right? I had this like light bulb moment. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put these free and anonymous mental health screenings on these bands. And I was passing them out at gun shows. And it was wild because of everything I did in the beginning was almost like pushing a line. Like I didn't know what the reaction was going to be. And it was crazy. I had people like literally like standing in the Eagle Imports booth, like the Bursa booth, and literally like, what is this? And I'm like, it's free and anonymous mental health screenings. We're a firearms, homegrown firearms organization that bridges the gap between the mental health community and the firearms industry. And I had people like literally in tears, like, thank you for doing this, right? And then it graduated. So I was like, what's the evolution of this? Like, I didn't get in trouble for passing these bands out at the NRA show or SHOT Show. Like, the NRA didn't get mad at me. No one cared. And I remember like saying, what's the next step? And I was like, what if I put this card in the boxes of all my firearms? And I went to my manufacturers and I was able to get them to agree to do it. Thank God they were from foreign countries, because I kind of feel like the foreign countries are a little bit more advanced when it comes to like talking about this stuff. They're less about their right. Does that make sense?
Wow.
Like they're so used to having their rights infringed upon in some of these countries. like, does that make sense? Like
in a weird kind of way. Yeah. That the birthplace of freedom, yes.
Yeah. So for me, like when I would have the discussion with my manufacturers, I was like, hey, I want to put this card in all the boxes of your guns. Are you cool with it? And they're like, what is it? And I'm like, it's free and anonymous mental health screenings for our customers so they can be healthy. And like, we want healthy customers, right? Like we sell guns. And they were like, yeah, it's a good idea. Go ahead and do it. I almost feel like that conversation the American companies wouldn't have been ready for it back then in 2018, right? Because that's like a huge leap. But the cool part about that was being able to be successful at it. Because I remember having a meeting with my employees, and I was like, hey, we're going to put these cards in the box. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if we're going to piss people off. I don't know if we're going to get in trouble with the NRA or the NSSF. I don't know if they're, people are going to be like, what are you doing? Right. Because once again, it was mutually exclusive. No one walked up to that line. Nobody tested it. And here's the cool thing. And I know this is kind of like the bigger picture of the question you asked, because you were looking for like anecdotal stories like down, but
Oh, this is fine.
we
The
were
macro level's fine.
okay, perfect. We were getting calls from people that bought like a Bursa, and they were like, "Hey, I bought one of your firearms, and you have this free and anonymous mental health screening card, and I just want to thank you. You have a customer for life." Like, I think it's awesome that you guys are tackling this. This is much needed. All these things. So people would share these stories, and like, we had people in the office that answered the phones that would tell me, "Hey, we got another call today. Like that card, like really resonated with somebody." And that's really what warms my heart when it comes to this. Companies. I remember the first time I branched out and I said, "Okay, we're ready for this." Like I can go up to different companies and look the owner in the eye and say, "I think you should put this card in the box," and know for a fact that they're not going to get themselves in any type of trouble. They're not going to get their customers in any type of trouble. And it's going to be a positive thing. And I remember I walked up to the owner of Arms Corps, it was Martin Tuason. And I walked up to the owner of High Point Firearms, which is Charlie Brown. Like these are guys that I've grown up with, right? And I said, "Hey, I need you to put this card in a box." And they're like, "What is it?" And I'm like, "Free and anonymous mental health screenings. I've been doing it in my boxes for the last 6 months." And I was like, believe it or not, like customers love it and it's really cool. And I remember both of them were like, "Oh yeah, I'm surprised nobody else has done this before. This is a good idea." It's
You
like,
never
it was
know
that
what
easy.
happens when you're first. It's really a proactive way to take this problem on. Um, you've done this for a long time now, but still I got to ask, what's next for Walk the Talk America? What do you, what's your, goal for the next year or two, or, I don't know if there's an in-state goal, unfortunately, but, what would be your next objective?
So the work never ends. And here's the crazy part. I don't owe anybody anything, but every year I feel like I have to come out with something new. I almost feel like I have like a mixtape and I got to keep just putting out hits because like a lot of people ask that question, right? We have a lot of programs. So like if someone goes to the website, like one of the
I'm on the
programs we
website
have,
now, like there's like 8 of them, 9 of them.
yeah, right. Like if you took every person that's involved in Walk to Talk America, every board member, and you sat them down and you said, what is the most important thing Walk to Talk America does? Like, what's the one thing that you think is the most important? Every one of them will give you a different answer. Whether it's the advocacy work, whether it's the free and anonymous mental health screenings inside the boxes of guns, right? But so for me, the work really never ends. There's a lot of gun companies out there that I still need to get on board with this, either the messaging or putting the screenings in the box. But at the same time, things fall into our lap every day that we never thought would happen. And I'm going to give you an example of that. I spoke at a Stop the Stigma conference, which is a mental health conference a couple months ago that was in Utah. And I recently got a phone call from somebody from Hollywood. And they were like, "Hey, I saw you speak at this conference and you really opened my eyes to a lot of issues that the gun community may have." And he's like, "I represent a group of writers in LA that write scripts for movies and TV shows that want to start incorporating responsible gun ownership into these shows instead of just showing gun ownership as something negative, right? Of death and destruction. And I think you could help with that." And I thought, wow, that's amazing. So I end up on the phone with this gentleman and then somebody who works as an armorer and props for firearms in Hollywood for movies. So to me, that's an advocacy piece, right? If this pans out and we can start incorporating, things in movies that make people think about responsible gun ownership, you can still have the fun stuff. You can still have the shoot 'em up and all that stuff, but like not just, I'm not just talking about people understanding muzzle flashing and trigger discipline. I'm talking about the messaging, right? Like
Right.
you can incorporate that stuff and it won't even mess up the flow of a movie or a TV show, but it might make a gun owner think about something, right? Like how many times do you see a gun owner in a movie or a TV show actually retrieve it from a pretty cool safe, a quick access safe? You really don't see that
No.
often. And I think that we can start incorporating these things where people will be like, "Oh, I want that safe. I have a gun. I want that safe. I think that's a great safe." Right. So to me, it's going to be continuing to build relationships. I think what I do, the most important thing is the crossover appeal that I've had. even the anti-gun side, you know, they may not like guns, but they like what I do. At least they do to my face, right? So, you know, to me, it's just keep doing the work, keep expanding the programs. The most important thing is trying to kind of get out of the box that we're stuck in. All of our funding, just to disclose to the listeners, because I'm sure people are like, well, how do you get your money? Comes from private donations from individuals, but it also comes from the firearms industry. We do not get any. We fail when we try to get government grants. My sneaking suspicion is, well, we know why.
Yeah.
Where I come from, right? Which is fine. I'm very lucky that the firearms industry sees the value in this, and I'm very proud of that, because I think a lot of people always say the firearms industry doesn't care. They celebrate when there's tragedy. You know, all they care about is arming people. No, I exist with my crew because the firearms industry knows that I can't get money from other outside sources. So they're supplementing this, but we have to find a way to break out of that box, right? Just because if we want to grow this and we want to take it to where it needs to be, it can't just be like a 2 or 3 man show. You know, I'm very blessed that I have a very modest salary for what I do. I walked away from a lot of money being a business owner to do this full time, but I'm complete in my soul for doing this. But everybody else that does this, and I have people that work with me in this organization that work as hard as I do for free, which is insane, right? And that just shows you how much this message resonates with people, that they're like, this is important. So what I would like to do is actually grow this thing to where we could just reach the masses and people understand it exists. Like, think about it. You've been around firearms for a long time and you didn't even know we existed until the other day, right? You know, that's going to be the next step, is making it a household name. But I think that's changing. Like I said, I've been invited to speak at events that, you know, the firearms industry was never invited to. Last year, I spoke at the Aspen Institute of Health. I was the very first person ever from the firearms industry to be invited to talk about it. So, you know, and they didn't beat me up. You know, that was the thing. I went there and I changed some hearts and minds and opened people's eyes to some of these issues that we're having as society, and how we need to be healthier mentally. And taking away people's stuff is not the way to do it. You need to empower them.
People, speaking of empower, how can people want to make a private donation or find out more about your organization? What's the best way for them to connect with you?
The best way is to just go to our website directly. It's WTTA.org or walkthetalkamerica.org, or you can go to any of the social medias like X, Instagram, Facebook, and it's at Walk the Talk US. And listen, money's tough these days. Like, we live in interesting times. I get it. You don't have to help with just the financial piece. Like, if you go to the website and you go under donations, we have a link that says other ways to help. And we can be creative with it. Like, we don't have to just, it doesn't have to be money, right? It's posting the message on social media. It's carrying all of our messages. It's reposting our stuff. It's talking to your friends about it. Those are like little mini donations to me. So don't feel like it has to be just financial. Go in, check it out, see if you love it, and see if it's something that you want to get behind and pass that information along. Or maybe you have, you know, maybe you own a print shop, right? Like, maybe you own a printing company and you want to help with printing. Like, there are other ways, in-kind donations that you can give. So don't think it's just about money. It's not just about money. There's other ways. So that's the best way to go and help Talk America.
Well, you got like shooting targets you can help that way, and other things. There's all kinds of stuff here for gun owners and several different ways. So I'll have the link to WTTA and the Oscar Mike Radio show post about this. You know, closing down, this is just a unique issue at a unique time. There's been several instances where, you know, firearms have been fortunately been used to commit heinous crimes in this country, and the underlying thing is this, you know, aspect of mental health. You know, I guess my last question is, when we think about mental health in the aggregate, at the whole, what's the foundational reason that we're having so many mental health problems in this country right now? Because I remember, my grandfather showing me pictures of them doing shooting class in school. My dad would take, they'd take their 30-30s and 22 caliber rifles to school in the back of the truck, and that was just the way it was. And it just seems like in the last 20 years, it's just we've swung the other way. And any perspective on why that is?
There's a lot of nuance in this one, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. So
Yeah, I think
take your
it's a
best shot.
combination. Yeah, take your best shot, right? Thank you for putting me on the spot and solving a mental health issue in the United States. No, I would say this: we did ourselves a disservice by not leaning into firearms and moving away from that, right? I think that was an experiment that maybe it failed. Like, hey, like maybe we should try to keep people away from guns instead of educating them about guns. I think that was a mistake.
Yep.
But it's not too late to turn back. I think we can start implementing firearms education on every level of, you going down all the way to the youth and coming up to adults who are just getting into this. So we can get that back. We have an issue with social media, and I'm not going to sit here and say social media is awful. I'm on social media all the time, but the world has gotten a lot smaller. And it used to be about community. And to me, like, for example, if you were going off the rails or you weren't in a good way, you only had your community that put you in check, right? It was hard to find like-minded individuals if you weren't surrounded by those individuals. And it's all about checks and balances. Now you can find and contact people that think just like you. And if you're going down a bad path, that's not good, because you create this negative feedback loop or you get stuck in your echo chamber. So I don't want to say it's all social media, but that didn't help, right? And then we've gotten away from being civil as a society, which is just upsetting to me. I got to work with both sides of the aisle. The nature of my work, this is a nonpartisan deal. I want it to be apolitical, right? Like I want people to look at Walk the Talk America and they're like, look, I hate guns, but I love what they do. Like, I know we need them out there, but I still hate guns. And that's okay. You can hate guns. Like, I'm not asking you to be anti-gun. I'm not asking you to be pro-gun. I need you to be pro-understanding. And I think like if we can start getting back to some things that like the gun neutral crowd, which is the majority of the United States, can get behind, we can start chipping away at some of these negative outcomes. But there's no one size fits all solution for the way that society is today. And I think we need to understand that. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we're intellectually dishonest and we lump gun violence all into one bucket, as if like inner city violence in Chicago is the same as suicide, and it's not. We need to start really kind of getting down to grassroots like work, root cause mitigation, finding out. It's like, okay, this kid the other day in Georgia, like, yeah, he shouldn't have had access to a firearm. We all agree upon that. Every gun person agrees that you shouldn't give your 14-year-old kid access to a firearm, unsupervised access. But at the end of the day, I want to know why he felt that he needed to do this. If we don't tackle that problem, we're never going to get better as a society. Because believe me, if that kid would have gone to school and stabbed my kid in the neck, I know that doesn't affect the rest of the world, but it affects me. And I don't want unhealthy people out there. So I told you in the beginning of the show that we are a suicide prevention organization at our core from the firearms industry, but we're not trying to get people when they're at that point of suicide. What we're trying to do is get upstream to prevent the unpredictable. What we want to do is catch people early and give them the tools and the resources to stay healthy when this becomes a horrible neighborhood to hang out in.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, that's where we need to go as a society. But I wish I could solve it. You'd be talking
Well,
to me from my own island.
well, again, though, there's a suite of tools and a place to go to start getting help and educating yourself. And I think that's one of the most important things that I've learned out of this. And it was just, again, one conversation. We asked a question about who else Grant was collaborating with, and then he mentioned, Walk the Talk America mentioned you. I went down the rabbit hole, and I'm like, well, why don't more people know about this kind of work, because it's needed so much now.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I want to give Grant his flowers too. Like when they first got involved in talking to us, It was like it took him 2 seconds to be like, this is a good idea. And he literally said, do you have a commercial? We want to put them in all the ammo vending machines. And literally that was like a week ago. So we created a commercial and we sent it over to him today. And he was like, this is perfect. We'll have it in all of the ammo vending machines today. And goes back to the force multiplier thing, right? Like, I want people to understand that there are gun industry companies out there that are literally starving for this and jump at the chance to be like, yeah, I'll carry this message and I'll do it. And he deserves his flowers for that, because he was one of the easiest phone calls I ever had from the jump, right? Like, sometimes it takes like 5 meetings for people to see where I'm going with it, but Grant was on top of it. And as you were, it's like, I love it when people can see it and go, okay, yeah, this is it. Like, this is the thing right here. We need it.
Well, I just want to thank you for coming on and talking with me. I certainly like to have you back on as you progress through, what you do, and things are going to change. Would definitely like to talk with you again. And I feel that, the veteran community can be a way to help and test things out. And I love the fact you're collaborating with these different groups who may or may not agree with everything that you do and support, but they understand that the mental health and suicide is an important thing to tackle.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And anytime you need me, I'm here. One phone call away. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, force multiplier, I've talked about this all year, where it's the power of relationships to move things forward. And Michael certainly, does that. And so, as we say in Oscar Mike Radio, we're mission flight. Michael, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Remember on it teaches our mission. We care about it and we do it every day. But I think there are things that just hit you and give you a reason to go on. The theme for our 2024 from Reach Across America is Live with Purpose. It just seemed to fit in with the vows of the REAP, the 10 attributes that we feel represent our United States military. I thought, what a great opportunity to put those two things together and show our kids through how we act some of the things that can make their lives better, their communities better, and by doing that, the country better. For me, Live with Purpose, I think, it's a mindset. Set some guidelines and then go out and purposefully make life different, make a change. It's an opportunity to set an example.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load Co-Sinister One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.